The 18 Strong Podcast, episode number 189 with Kyle Shay and Mike Napoleon from SuperSpeed Golf.
80% of the value of the training of SuperSpeed Golf is all the neuromuscular training, speed training that we're talking about. The other 20% tends to be very different for different players, depending on what types of deficiencies they have in their swing, in their power productions.
Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, where you get direct access to the world's greatest experts on training harder, practicing smarter, and playing better golf. Now, here's your host, Jeff Pellizzero.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast. And if you are a brand new listener, I want to say thanks for joining us and checking out the show. We've got a ton of episodes on golf, fitness, nutrition, mental game, health, wellness, everything you can think of under the sun and outside of the box of golf here on the 18 Strong Podcast. So you can check that out either in iTunes, Stitcher, or of course on our website, 18strong.com, where we've got a complete archive of all the episodes. Today we've got some special guests on the show. We've got two guys that have both been on the show before and have been huge supporters of what we're doing here at 18 Strong. And we are massive supporters of the product that they've created, SuperSpeed Golf. And I know that many of you out there are using the SuperSpeed clubs. It's an overspeed training system to basically help you swing the club faster, creates better balance in your swing, a much more athletic movement in your swing, and helps work on sequencing, power, and of course, creating more distance off the tee box. So if you haven't heard of SuperSpeed Golf yet, you should go check them out at superspeedgolf.com, of course, after you listen to this full episode. But I know that with so many people using the SuperSpeed clubs, we've got tour players. I forget how many tour players they have using it, but it's in the hundreds of tour players. You've seen Phil Mickelson, Ian Poulter, Billy Horschel. All of these guys and girls are using the clubs to improve their ability to swing a club faster. And it doesn't all just boil down to swinging club faster gives you better distance, but at the highest of levels, gaining another mile or 2 or 5 per hour on your swing speed is a drastic difference. Now, for the beginner golfer, they've also seen crazy numbers of improving swing speed. And so if you've experienced this, or if you've experienced these clubs, you've most likely seen a big change and a big jump. And so we wanted to answer a lot of the questions that people have about overspeed training in general, which is kind of the general global term of kind of what the SuperSpeed club set was designed around, is the concept of overspeed and underspeed training. But we know that there's a lot of questions on how to use the clubs, what are the parameters, what are the protocols, and how to maybe vary the protocols if need be. So we wanted to bring Kyle and Mike on the show to, really kind of spread the wealth of knowledge that they've gained now that they've worked with thousands of clients. They've worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of tour players, but also regular Joes like you, like me, that are, looking to improve your golf game in whatever capacity you can, fitness, nutrition, and now, something like this, some sort of a tool that's going to help you. And they put this in a different category from fitness, from, skills training. This is more neuromuscular training, and you're going to hear them talk about training your nervous system, which is a very cool concept. Now, before we jump into the show with these guys, I want to ask a quick favor from you as a listener, hopefully as a longtime listener, but even if you are a brand new listener, if this is your first time listening and you get value out of this episode, or you've gotten value out of any other episodes that you've heard here on the 18 Strong Podcast, we've now been doing this for almost 3 years, and we continue to get great feedback. We continue to put out as much great content as we can, and we just ask that you help spread the word on the 18 Strong Podcast. So my ask of you is, if you have one friend that loves golf and you think they want to hit a ball farther, is you share this episode with them, or just share the 18 Strong Podcast with them. And of course, if you're not subscribed in iTunes and you haven't left a rating or review, that does a world of good for us to help spread the word about 18 Strong. So as we continue to try to push this movement of getting golfers stronger, getting golfers healthier, to be able to play this game the way that you want to play it for a much longer period of time at a much higher level, we just ask that you help spread the word by sharing this with at least one person. All right, let's get into it with Mike and Kyle. I want to hear what's going on. You've got so many of these different tour players that you're now working with. what's some of the latest and greatest going on the tour? Obviously, some of the big things we're seeing, Phil Mickelson, Ian Poulter, those guys. So tell us a little bit of what's been happening, since the last time you were on the show with a lot of the tour players.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, at this point, Jeff, I believe we're well over half of the tour players in the world have an active program with SuperSpeed Golf, which is pretty exciting. I think our current count on the PGA Tour, exempt on the PGA Tour, is what, Kyle, about 105?
Yeah, as of this week, it's over 100 based on the Valero.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously there's been a ton of traction with speed training itself is something that most players that play golf have never done, whether they're an elite tour player or a beginner. Like, most people have never done any pure speed training, especially not speed training as specifically directed at the golf swing is what we do with SuperSpeed Golf. So they all get benefit out of it, whether they're an elite athlete or not. So that's one of the reasons that you've seen, that many guys on tour pick this up, which, I mean, you don't see a lot of training products that many people are using. And just simply because, again, they've never really done this type of training before specifically. It's just something completely new for the industry. And that means that all of these guys wanted to try it and pick it up, and they all got gains.
Yeah. And I think, most of the time you see something like this come out or some sort of a product come out, and it either works for one segment or another segment. You don't usually see it working for the highest level players. And that's what's been so kind of crazy to see is that these guys have latched on, because even at the highest of level, like you said, they've never done anything like this before, and they see that immediate result. And it's almost like anything that you do, if you can show somebody immediate gratification or an immediate result, like, yeah, why would I not want more? Now, Kyle, are you guys working directly with these different tour players? How does that work? I know that a lot of different fitness professionals obviously are using your stuff, and swing coaches are using the SuperSpeed clubs, but do you guys directly relate to, let's say, a guy like an Ian Poulter or a Phil Mickelson?
Yeah, based on the demand we've had, I've tried to be out on tour maybe once a month on PGA Tour, throwing a couple webs and then LPGA events. We just get requests every week for, I want to do it, but I want to do it right. So can you come work with my coach or my trainer out on tour as well? And we'll put it into our plan. We also have a rep out there every week now because of that type of demand. And when you're out there swinging these clubs, you know how they sound, you know how they look. There's eyeballs peering out everywhere at this. So one player starts to see it, then the other player starts to see it, and inevitably they kind of creep over and want to know what's going on. And also they play in packs together. So you've got like that famous Jordan Spieth, Ricky, Smiley type of crew. Well, each of them play their practice rounds, and when they start to notice their friends are hitting it farther, they're wanting to know what they're doing, and then they end up telling them about SuperSpeed. So then it kind of goes into that pack or that group, and it's been moving around like that on tour. So it's really cool to see those guys getting really huge gains as well, let alone just the amateur golfers that we always talk about on the 18 Strong podcast getting all these gains.
Did you ever find any of them like not really wanting to share it with their buddies?
Yeah, for sure, especially in the beginning. We had that on a lot of tours, but now it's kind of hard to keep it a secret, especially if you're doing that training at an event, either in the trailer, in their hotel gym, or on the range. So not a lot don't want to do it anymore. We've had a couple in the top 10. We can't mention their names, but you've seen most of them get caught on Golf Channel, especially like your Poulters and your Mickelsons now, where they're going to do it and you're going to see it.
Yeah, and to add a little there, like specific programs that we've built for these players, those two that you mentioned, we haven't built their own programs, but we've definitely had contact with their coaches and things that they're doing with. We've built, 150, 160 different programs for people ourselves that are out on tour. But a lot of times, again, they do have a coach that's been working with the product for a while, and, they're doing, don't want to say their own thing, but they're using it very specifically with that player. It's actually spurred some of the stuff we'll talk about today with some of the new protocols that we're developing. It's been a very interactive and cool process for us because we've gotten some new ideas that then we've put into our own testing bank to really do some R&D on to figure out if those things are going to work for everybody. And we got some cool new stuff to talk about. So
cool. Kyle, you mentioned that, some of these guys would bring you in and say, like, I want to do it, but I want to do it right. What are some of the things that you've seen people, and this can go to both of you guys, that you guys have seen where people have been using them incorrectly? Are there specific things that you kind of see over and over, and you're like, well, we gotta nip that in the bud?
Oh, there's some funny ones, huh?
Yeah, we've had cases where they're only using one club instead of all three or two clubs. It can be because they just don't want to travel with another pound in their club glove. That could be the reason, is I'm at 50 pounds or 75 pounds, which is a funny excuse for those guys. Or they're not sure about the grip on it. So we're like, yeah, you can put your own grip on it. It's okay. I think they get a little nervous to change that club in any. You know how finicky tour players are, so it takes a bit of massaging to get it into them and make them feel comfortable. But if we get their coach and their trainer there, they seem to be better. One of the instances was a player last year told us he felt like it was messing up his tempo, and we said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'm just using the blue club." Like, okay, are you using the other ones? No. So it's a big progression of light to heavy up through the system, and that's how you get it obviously to work and translate more into your actual hitting of a golf ball. So we really don't deviate whatsoever from what we do in our general training protocols on the website than what we give to the tour players, even though they might seem like they want to do something different.
Yeah, we've tried very hard, Jeff, to make sure that all the stuff that we publish on our website is heavily vetted. I mean, those protocols went through over a year of testing that are up there now, and some of the new stuff that we'll be announcing. I mean, we've spent another year testing some other details to make them even better and progress it forward. But we've been very careful with that. It seems like a lot of times, especially with your tour players, they all want to have their own little secret of what they're able to do that's going to make them better more so than somebody else. And I think in some ways, whether it's true or not, that belief for them is very important, that they have this secret sauce that's going to help them get better, and it keeps them dedicated and focused and working. But yeah, I mean, Kyle had a funny incident at a tournament where a very prominent player came up to him and was like, well, I'm not doing exactly what you guys have on the website with it, right? I mean, I'm not going to do that. And we're like, well, I mean, we think you should. Like, we've tested that. We know it works. And he's like, oh, no, I mean, we're doing something a little bit different, but it's similar, but it's a little different. We're like, all right, go to town. Like, whatever you need to do.
We got something a little more advanced. You guys haven't figured this out yet,
Yeah, exactly.
And I would imagine, because all of these guys have their own coaches, professionals, every coach wants to kind of put their own spin on something too. And they think they may have a better way to do it. So what does the testing actually look like? I mean, what is that process? You mentioned going through a year's worth of testing. What does that entail, just so people understand, yeah, this has really kind of gone through the rigors?
Yeah, well, it's not just like we watch some people swing it and see if they get a little bit more speed on a speed rater. I mean, it's usually we have some different test groups. We'll have different level of players in different test groups. We'll go through before and after testing with TrackMan, so we know exactly the speeds they were before, the speeds they were after. We'll actually measure all the speeds of the different clubs during the training protocols to see how fast the green clubs and the blue clubs and the red clubs are going, to make sure that's all consistent. Then we're looking at a lot of different ground force data. We've done a lot of work with Body Track and some of the other force plate systems to really see what our product is affecting in ground force mechanics. We've got all kinds of data and research that we've done with 3D biomechanics to see how it affects the kinematics of the swing, how it affects the motor pattern of the golf swing. So I'd say that's just a little bit of an overview. Our new director of education that we just brought on, Daisy McKenney, who just did a master's thesis on everything that with SuperSpeed, was basically doing a lot of like university style academic studies to really look at the effect of overspeed training on ground force mechanics and rotational biomechanics in the golf swing. So from studies at academies to studies at independent areas to full on university studies, I mean, we're looking at all kinds of detail to test out what a different drill might do when you use it into an overspeed protocol. Like, let's say we're testing our step change swing or our kneeling swings, or we want to know what that stuff is going to do before we recommend that people do it. And again, the stuff that makes it through and actually gets to a published point on our website, we know those drills are going to help almost every single person that touches it. I guess that's our vetting process. That's why we've done it that way. We also feel like that's one of the reasons that the training has been so successful for people when they get it, is things are vetted and things really are looked into in depth.
Well, I think that's an important thing for people to notice, and that's why I wanted to ask the question, because yeah, sometimes a product will just get thrown to market because, hey, this is a cool idea, and we saw it work for a couple people, and let's just go with it. But I knew, and I know how much you guys put in behind the scenes that everybody doesn't really see, and all the data that's tracked and those kinds of things. What are some of the big questions that you guys get from people? And I know we had in our Facebook group, you guys are in our private Facebook group, the 18 Strong Movement, we had some great questions, had a really good thread going. What are some of the big questions that you guys get about the clubs, maybe from people that have already bought them, they're already starting to use them, but they're just trying to figure out how to, what's maybe something that they're doing that they shouldn't be doing, or what are some of those big questions?
I think, Jeff, the two ones that I see the most are, can I train with this more than every day? And how long do I need to keep training with it if I stop so that the results stay permanent? And then Mike can address, I think, the kneeling swings, which is one that we were talking a lot about in that thread. So those are the three biggest ones I see. From your perspective and my perspective, being a background in the fitness, physio, rehab type side, we get challenged often about, well, why can't I train more than 3 times a week or every other day? I'm fit. I do gym work. I practice all the time. I can handle it. And we really try to stress that the fatigue level that you're getting through SuperSpeed is not a physical fatigue you'd feel like after you did a strength training workout or even regular, like a power training workout or a stability workout. It's a neural fatigue. And so we, when we're doing this overspeed training, we're getting a level of training, a neuromuscular training, where we're trying to train the brain to signal the body to move faster in that known motor pattern. So the fatigue level you're going to see is something that you've never really probably felt unless you did some type of applied or specific speed training. And so it's really important to take that day off in between. No matter, every time I've challenged somebody, I said, okay, try it 2 days in a row. That second day, they're slower. No matter from like the highest speed athletes I've tested through juniors, through just your average club golfer. So just really want to stress that we've never seen bigger gains doing more than.
If I could jump in there, it's interesting that you say, I've had the radar, the swing speed radar that we got from you guys, and have had guys and girls swinging, and just having it out and letting them swing, every time with that thing, it really shows you how quickly somebody can change, like how quickly it can decrease when they start to get tired. And they think they're swinging the same speed. They think they're swinging with the same amount of effort, and they're like, man, I just can't get it again. I'm like, that's because you're tired, and we got to be done. You have to take your break. And it really kind of highlights the fact that if you continue to tax that central nervous system over and over and over again, eventually you're gonna fizzle out, and you're just wasted for a short period of time or a long period of time. Do you guys recommend that people more often than not swing with the swing speed radar, or do you recommend only breaking that out every now and then? Mike?
I'd say absolutely. Right, Kyle? I mean, the radar is just a great feedback tool for the whole process. Like, it's like anything else. If you know exactly how fast that went, if whatever you felt on that previous swing made it go faster or slower. I think that's one of the cool areas of coaching that this allows you to do in a very simple way. Because a lot of times I see people the first time when I tell them to really try to make that number go high, and they grip it really tight, they tense up, and they just try to really let it whirl, and it goes down. Speed goes down because they weren't really working as efficiently as they could. So yeah, absolutely. I'd say use the radar all the time because it's going to help you figure out what's actually going to make you go faster and more efficient.
And Jeff, Mike is notoriously like the most aggressive when we're coaching players. It's funny, like I'll maybe like tiptoe in a little bit, but Mike is just like, come on, give me more. And we've never worked with a player when we go and work with them personally versus on their own that they've really been maxing out. So I think you got to push yourself more than you think, and that radar helps tremendously. And Mike's in there screaming at him, like, come on, you got more.
I've witnessed, I actually witnessed that firsthand when we were shooting a little video, and Mike basically called me a wuss on air because I wasn't. Yeah,
that happened. Yeah, Kyle's nearly banned me from going to LPGA Tour tournaments now because I was just yelling at people too loudly at the range, and all the girls are looking around like, what is going on over there? Like, you just got to go faster. It's too pretty and easy little swing. Like, come on.
Well, before I forget, the second piece that you were talking about, Kyle, was the other question of how long do I need to use it before I see gains or before I stop seeing gains? What do you see there?
So we want a minimum of 6 weeks, which is kind of our base recommendation for that intro or starter protocol that those out there have done, which would be just your standing and step drill type swings. But our ideal preference is if you can get to that 3-month barrier or that 12 weeks, you really start to see it stay permanent. So not that you won't on 6 weeks, but if we can get people to 3 months, and even if they take months at a time off, typically they're going to come back and be almost the same, if not identical, the same speed. So they crossed over that barrier of, here's when I signal my body to make that motor pattern, and now every time it signals it, it just does that new speed. And there was a guy you had on, Max Prokopi, and I really loved that guy. I thought he had a lot of good stuff to say, and he taught Mike and I about a term called flash memory, which was when you make a swing that's faster in that same motor pattern, it flashes into the brain as like a new memory. And if you have enough of that memory, but not too much, like we said, and getting fatigued, it will override that neuromuscular response. And now you stand up there, you're with your driver, and you just make that faster swing, but everything else is the same. So I thought Max really helped us to understand what's happening in the brain.
Yeah, he's incredible with all the technological stuff that they're able to use and look at the different statistics of speed and rotation, all that stuff. I hadn't heard that from him yet. That's pretty cool. I want you, before we jump into the kneeling swings thing, since we're kind of talking about the neural memory and neural fatigue, I want you to address the idea of the SuperSpeed clubs as a power tool versus a conditioning tool, because I think people sometimes will use it, just for the purpose of, I need to increase my endurance. So if I do a bunch of swings, I'm going to get better endurance at the end of the course. But we're really using these specifically to kind of amp up that horsepower.
You want to go for that, Mike?
Yeah, let me take a little stab at this, and then you can correct me from the health and physical side. I saw a great analogy actually at a World Golf Fitness Summit a couple of years ago, or maybe even 4 years ago. I can't even remember when it was, but it was basically an illustration of when you're training, what are your goals and what are you trying to train for? And, if you looked at, a marathon runner versus looking at a sprinter, their body types, the way they train are significantly different, I would say, so, and in most cases, what we're looking at from a power sport, a rotational power sport training like golf, is we're much more involved in that sprint kind of a position than we are about being able to run a marathon. So in order to train that properly, there's different types of things that are important. We're looking for max intensity with each rep that we do in the training. We're looking for short amounts of reps in the training. We're looking for short overall training sessions. We're not looking for long, extended types of training that are going to help us to, build like cardiovascular fitness necessarily. We're looking for peak performance and power and speed gain. Kyle, you can probably add to that too.
Yeah, I think we have to really think about that as a different segment, Jeff. It's not pure fitness training, and it's not golf specific training. It's like an in between. Speed training, and you're seeing it in other sports. I think golf has never really done full applied speed training. I mean, I think we've done Olympic lifting, we've done plyometrics, med ball work, but to really get that to translate, I think sometimes if you do all that type of training in the gym, it doesn't even translate. So sometimes you have to just rep that motor pattern, but at higher velocities or higher speed or rotational speeds. And I think the cardio aspect of it, or the conditioning aspect, can be addressed in much better ways than it could with just doing super speed.
That's a great answer. There's so much research on being as specific as possible in whatever your sport is, and obviously you can't get any more specific than what you guys have created. Is there a threshold when you're working with a client or a golfer and you're watching that swing speed radar when they're swinging at max effort and you see a dip in their speed and you say, okay, that's it. When you see them drop down to a certain number, let's just say easy numbers are swinging at 100 miles an hour. Is there a number that you then watch and say, if they dip down below this, you're going to kind of cut them off because you feel like they're too fatigued? Or have you guys even figured out a threshold there?
I'm not sure I would cut them off, but I might give them a little bit of a break. Might give them another 15, 20 seconds and then give it another shot. And if we still can't get up there, that's important. Like for a player swinging at 100 miles an hour, like we want to see the green club going at least in the high 110s. I'd say 118 plus. But we've seen players get that green club that start at 100 up in the high 120s a lot of times. But if they're not able to at least get into that 16 to 18% faster mark with the green club and stay in about the 14 to 15% faster mark with the blue one, and even stay in the 8 to 12% faster mark with the red club than their normal club speed, then I would say that person's probably overly fatigued and having an issue going through the training. But the other thing too that you can look at is for every individual player, you can actually measure how fast those speeds are going when they're at peak. And trying to maintain that and keep it up there is definitely a benefit.
And sometimes it's just I need the next session or the next session they just start to understand more of what they have and what they don't have, and we'll pull them off and give them a little rest. But if we start to see them slowing down, especially that heavy club, slower than their driver or around their driver, and we're pushing them and they're not getting any faster, then it's going to work against the goal of the training, because we want that heavy club, which should be a little heavier than their driver, to always be moving faster than the driver to maintain that overspeed training concept.
Yeah, and once they fatigue, Jeff, it's not like it dips down 2 miles an hour. Like it dips 15. Right. Like, when they get to the point where they're neurologically fatigued, like they can't even get it back up to their normal club speed most of the time, even with the lighter club. So it's very distinct when that happens, and it's pretty easy to.
Gotcha. That was a great point about the red club too, that it should still be moving faster than the normal driver, because I think that was something that I didn't even necessarily really pay as much attention to as I was to the blue club. Let me jump in and say thanks to our sponsor for this week's episode, Rad Roller. Rad Roller makes some incredible soft tissue and myofascial release products. And with all the talk here with Kyle and Mike about creating speed and improving your distance, there's a specific thing that your body needs in order to be able to harness all of that rotation, all of that speed, all of that balance, and that's the ability to move. And what Rad Roller has created are products that are designed to help you move better. Specifically for you golfers out there, this allows you to hit the hips, hit the shoulders, and create more motion in those areas that you need it most. Your hips, your shoulders, your calves, your feet, all of these different areas. Rad Roller has a product that's designed to fit all those little nooks and crannies. So if you've ever struggled with using your typical foam roller to hit those spots on either your leg, your back, your shoulders, your hips, look no further than Rad Roller. They've got a product for you, whether it be their traditional Rad Roller product, the Helix, the Rad Rod, the Rad Rounds. They've got you covered. So no matter what your needs are for improving your mobility, improving the pliability of the tissue around your joints, go to radroller.com. Check out their whole suite of products. They've also got some great kits where you can bundle up some of the different products that they have for a discounted price. And speaking of discounts, if you use 18STRONG as your code, you're going to get a sweet discount there too. All right, let's get back to the SuperSpeed guys. Mike, let's jump into the idea of the kneeling swings. And first, if you could, just kind of explain why we do the kneeling swings. But also, we had a couple questions in the group just regarding, are the kneeling swings safe for the back? And Kyle really kind of pointed out a specific point about the stance that really made a difference for the people that were utilizing it and not utilizing it.
Yeah. So let me preface this with an important point about SuperSpeed Golf, and then we'll dive right into the details. We find, and this is just sort of a number we're pulling out of the air, but it's in that, let's say 80% of the value of the training of SuperSpeed Golf is all the neuromuscular training, speed training that we're talking about. The other 20% tends to be very different for different players, depending on what types of deficiencies they have in their swing, in their power productions. So part of that for players, that other 20% comes from ground force mechanics. Part of that other 20% usually comes from rotational sequencing and efficiency. And then part of that comes from lag generation and, good release positions. So let's look at that as an overview. So weaved into all of the different protocols that we build for SuperSpeed, again, the primary goal is always the neuromuscular speed training. But weaved into all of that other stuff are a bunch of these other drills that tend to work on those other three elements at the same time without players even knowing they're doing it, which in my opinion is always the gold standard in coaching. When you can get people to work on stuff without them even knowing it, you don't have to muddy the waters anymore with mechanics or anything because they're just trying to make it move fast, but it's going to help out all these other areas. So the kneeling swings specifically are actually one of the best rotational biomechanic drills you can possibly do for sequencing, both transition sequencing and like downswing, deceleration chain, peaking sequencing in the kinematics. So essentially energy transfer in the body. So what happens when you take a kneeling position and you do that kneeling position the right way in what we're trying to do in that drill, which is with your knees not too far apart, what you're actually doing is you're destabilizing your pelvis a lot. So like if you think about it, people at home while they're listening to this, if you stand up and kind of get into that athletic stance with your legs, you can actually feel that you can move your hips pretty well because you're actually pretty stabilized with your legs below that. Well, if you take that away and you get into that kneeling posture, all of a sudden it becomes a lot more difficult brain to body from a motor control standpoint to be able to accelerate and then stop or decelerate the hips when they move. So like fire in the pelvis and then stopping and transferring energy up to your torso. It's one of the reasons that we see players have a hard time sometimes generating a lot of speed with the kneeling swings, because those players are ones that if we looked at on 3D would have very inefficient biomechanics. They wouldn't be transferring energy very well. So again, learning that motor control of how the hips fire and then how they decelerate in order to transfer energy to the torso, and then how the torso fires and decelerates and transfers energy to the arm and the club is an incredibly difficult area to coach, in my opinion, but it's an essential thing that you see all the best players in the world doing very well. And it's one of the reasons you see these swings that look, I don't want to say effortless, because it looks like players now are making an aggressive move at it, but it's the way, like a Justin Thomas who weighs 170 pounds is creating 180 mile an hour ball speed all the time. Like they're very efficient in the way they rotate and transfer energy. So the kneeling swings, again, destabilizing that lower body, making it harder to control the motion of the pelvis in the acceleration and then kind of deceleration or stabilization of it to transfer energy is the primary goal with that drill.
Well, and I think what the question was and where the misconception was really is maybe a better word to say it is with the knees spread out a little bit further apart, many of us, I think, and I'll throw myself in this category, we're almost using it to kind of lock down the lower body, which is the opposite of what you're talking about. Is and if we're locking down the lower body, we're spreading out the knees and not letting the pelvis rotate the way that it should. Then you're putting a lot of stress on the thoracic spine. If the thoracic spine or shoulders aren't working, then you're putting a lot of stress on the lower back. And I think that's where people kind of see it and they're like, "Whoa, is that even safe?" But Kyle, really, you really kind of clarified it in the Facebook group that when you bring the knees in and you're letting that pelvis rotate, you'll actually see the pelvis rotate almost to the point of what it will in a real swing.
Yep. Again, it's basically a motor control drill. It's not necessarily – that's the primary goal of that position, is just to work on the motor control, brain to body in the pelvis, and creating speed and energy transfer.
And Jeff, I wanted to encourage people out there. That's why we have that new kind of like stability pad that we put, and you guys out in the gym world that have maybe an AirX pad, it's similar. It's just a little more firm than that. Why we like that is it gives you a little bit of cushion and a little bit of elevation. So anytime someone feels uncomfortable on their knees, they're going to slow down, because that like uncomfortability or pain signal says, heck no, I'm not going to put more speed into something that I feel bad in or pain in. We want to make sure to keep the knees, within that base of the pelvis, not wider than that, and put something soft under there if you can with slight elevation, ideally like one of those pads. You'll notice a tremendous difference in both your speeds and also the feel in your body.
So speaking of the motor control, another question that we had, and you somewhat addressed this, Mike, but the question was, should I worry more about swinging as fast as I can, or should I worry about swinging as fast as I can with my good golf mechanics?
I think that question kind of answers itself in the way that when a player generates close to that maximum amount of speed that their body is capable of, we actually tend to see that. We tend to see that also create a more efficient sequencing and energy transfer in the body. So, to say that another way, like as you learn how to athletically swing the club faster, you become more efficient at swinging the club, which causes you to improve the sequencing and biomechanics of your golf swing. I'd even take it to the level that as we see players gain speed with super speed, we also tend to see them become more consistent. They have an easier time square in the face. They have an easier time with centerness of contact on the face because, again, as you're working more athletically and more efficiently, you're creating a more repeatable and efficient pattern overall. I think that's a big misconception that people have that, if they try to go up and swing hard, they're going to be much more inconsistent. And we just simply don't see that. And it's one of the things you see on tour all the time too. I mean, you see these players, sometimes flying off the ground as they're coming through, but they're still hitting it in the center of the face and they're still pretty much squaring it up every time. And it has to do with working in that more efficient athletic motion as opposed to, trying to swing easy and control everything, which is just a recipe for disaster, in my opinion, in the golf swing.
Yeah, the whole swing easy, trying to control it, I find personally just almost makes things worse because it makes you so much more technical and you're kind of thinking about the different little pieces of your swing. And so usually when I have someone swinging with your clubs or even just hitting balls, it's kind of like, no, just kind of tap into that athletic ability and just swing. Don't think about it, just swing and let's see what happens. So when you have people out there, do you ever work on any kind of technique stuff with when they're swinging the clubs?
With super speed?
Yeah.
I would say not right at the start. Like I'd say at least let them have a couple weeks to try to figure it out for themselves. Then the only real coaching cues that we'll really get into might be just some detail on like how to do the step change of direction swing, how to do some of the protocols correctly. So little things like that. But in general, we're trying to promote discovery learning with this. We're trying to promote that player kind of figuring out for themselves what they need to do, what they need to feel in order to make that club move faster down at the bottom. And I think that type of learning is just so much more effective because, number one, once they figure it out, they've sort of learned it for themselves. They don't have 4 different swing thoughts they're trying to think about to make it happen. So I'm very, my personal opinion, I'm very minimalist when it comes to that type of coaching. I think that's important. I think learn things more permanently when they're thinking about less and they're trying to accomplish goals if you give them the tools they need to be able to figure that out.
Nice.
Jeff, and I think we see this even more on the non-dominant swings where someone doesn't have a process in there. They don't have, some type of software to access in their hard drive that says this is how I should make this swing. And so they figure it out pretty quickly sometimes from being terrible at a left-handed swing or a non-dominant swing to becoming pretty good. And they sequence well, and oftentimes it looks better than their regular golf swing.
And it doesn't take long.
Yeah.
It doesn't take long. So on the right side or the dominant side, sometimes it's hard to get out of that cloud of mechanics that you've had in there because you've repped that motor pattern for so long that it's really hard to access something else. But not putting a face on the end of the club and just trying to figure out how to move that head as fast as you can around impact can do wonders for kind of getting them out of all the other thoughts and figuring out how to be athletic or tapping back into something maybe they did when they were younger in their sport or whatever lifestyle background they had.
Yeah, I challenge a lot of the golf coaches out there. I think probably a lot of those guys listen to these podcasts and, take some video of your players' swings while they're going all out doing a super speed swing and look at some of the positions and look at some of the sequencing and look at what it looks like. You might be surprised at how many things get cleaned up when you let that player get out of their own way.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'd like to see some side-by-sides of, if there's something that they're working on specifically and then you watch them do the super speed swing and see if that doesn't kind of naturally take care of itself. With the opposite-handed swings, obviously I know that there's a lot of the acceleration, deceleration stuff that's being worked on. You're rotating in the opposite direction, which a lot of us don't get on a regular basis. But as far as like the nervous system, the central nervous system, is there anything out there where research kind of shows that swinging on the opposite side actually helps facilitate the movement pattern on the dominant side? Have you guys found anything like that? I kind of remember back in physical therapy school, learning about how with stroke patients and actually working with stroke patients, and if we're working on their affected side, we would do their other side just to almost ingrain that pattern. But I don't remember. That was a neuroscience class from a long. Kyle, have you heard of anything specifically regarding that?
I mean, based on our experience, I've seen a lot of times that if they do non-dominant swings, it cleans up their sequencing and mechanics on their dominant side. I mean, I would say it's 75% of the time. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly medical studies out there that you could pull up and look at sort of neural network patterning in the body and how one side can affect the other. And there's certainly been tons of research on that. We haven't. I mean, we're not in the medical profession on that level.
You're not neuroscientists.
We haven't looked at a lot of that on the neuroscience standpoint. I can tell you there's certainly correlation between improvement of kinematic sequencing on the dominant side from non-dominant side training, specifically in the deceleration chain, in the energy transfer between segments. We definitely see improvement there. I think there's probably multiple reasons that happens. I have a feeling some of it has to do with, neurokinetic chains. I think some of it probably also has to do with muscle activation and stability in some of those segments improving from just using those muscles that the player hadn't done before. Again, a lot of that's theoretical. I don't have a lot of hard research proof, but I'm sure there's some people out there that do. Definitely we see correlation with that.
I've got a study for you to do if you haven't done it yet. Have you guys ever had a group where they only do the SuperSpeed protocol on the non-dominant side and not doing both sides, but only do it on the non-dominant side for a short period of time just to see what happens there?
I've done some myself. It hasn't been nearly as robust as all the other stuff we've done, but I can legitimately say that if you do non-dominant training, only speed training, your dominant side speeds do increase. Yeah,
that's what I was wondering. That's cool. I'd like to see.
Yeah,
I'd like to see that.
Most people want to do both, though.
Yeah, I know it's going to be hard to get a golfer to not swing it, secretly on the other side. Like, I'm going to get a little faster here. What about
Jeff? I have had a couple players back in the day when we were first kind of doing a lot of this stuff that had, let's just say that we had very poor motor coordination overall. I would tend to have those players do a few more reps on the non-dominant side than the dominant side a lot of times. That seemed to have some benefit for those people being able to pick up dominant side traits that I was looking for.
That's interesting. Sure. What about, is there
just general coordination training?
What about kind of the thought process or the thought around plateauing with overspeed training? Is that a thing, or have you seen that it continues to progress, or is there something where you should take a break from it? What have you guys found in regards to kind of that plateau?
Mike, you want to go for that one?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we definitely see that the first plateau starts between 6 and 8 weeks for players and usually lasts for about another month to 2 months once they get there. So that's kind of what we look at as our first training cycle. That's why Kyle refers to that 3-month period, that we are very confident in permanency in that training after that point. We certainly, it's a little different for everybody. It's not an exact number of days you need to go through it to get there. We find that the plateau tends to start between 6 and 8 weeks, and then it goes usually for about a month to 2 months after that. It's actually one of the times that's when we start to make the protocols more aggressive to then get the next jump phase started, which definitely happens. So like after that, like 3 months, usually sometime in the 3rd to 4th month of training that players are going, we usually see another jump. That's on average about 3 to 5%, where the first one was 5%. Happens at a different time for a lot of different players, so it gets spaced out more than, it's not as immediate to see as that initial one, but certainly happens. That plateau phase tends to take about another 6 to 8 weeks to get to a point where they get to a plateau during that jump phase. That one tends to last a lot longer. We see that one last, generally speaking, 6 to 8 months after that. Advancing the protocols again, we do see down the road additional jumps. They tend to get smaller as they go, so there is some diminishing returns with this. That's kind of how I would answer a lot of that about the plateauing and expectations. The other thing that I'll bring up there that I think is really important, because you do see a lot of tour players nowadays doing this before. Generally, these are a lot of the players that have been working with the system for a lot of times after they've been working with it for a year and a half, 2 years. what they've tended to find is that it's a great way for them to trigger their bodies just to kind of wake up and kind of get that neuromuscular system primed, if you will, to go out and feel the way they want to feel on golf. So although at that point in the training after 2 years, they're not looking for another 5% jump in speed off of any given day they're going out to train. They're just trying to prime the nervous system so that they get that feel that they like about exactly how their body's moving, and that tends to just prime them very well to go out and play around a golf. That's something that we don't necessarily recommend for players that are in the first 6 weeks of training with the programmer going through one of those jump phases, because we don't want to change things before the round. But once you get into those plateaus, doing it before the round does seem to be something that helps a lot of players, improve their performance for a given round.
Yeah, I think that we've seen in most recent years, especially with a lot of the stuff that's come out of TPI, just the benefit of just warming up in general to get your body awake and to get the muscles moving properly. And once you have a tool like that you're comfortable and familiar with, but another good point, don't just out of the gate go take the SuperSpeed club and start swinging the first day you get it on the driving range before you go play 18 holes, because your body's not used to that. You have no bearings there. So what's up next for the SuperSpeed group? You guys have a lot of new things coming out. I think you mentioned some new protocols. What can we look forward to? Kyle, I think there's a certification program coming up.
Yeah, we're really excited about that. We continually get requests for, where can I learn more about this? Can you guys come do a lecture for us at our club or our academy? And we have just spread across the world now in so many countries. What we wanted to do was really get people comfortable with speed training and the ins and outs. So all about overspeed training, and then there'll be some extras in there about, the ground force stuff, some of the kinematics we talked about, some of that wrist or lag mechanics. And it's going to be a 3-part type of a training that you can go through all online. So we're getting that all filmed and shot next month, and then hopefully launching that here within the summer. And that will be very robust kind of online training platform for just regular people or anyone that wants to go through it as a coach or a trainer.
Cool. And Mike, what else do you guys have coming up?
Yeah, so we're reworking sort of how we do our initial protocols. Not that they're going to change in major ways, but we're adding 2 new drill positions in, which I think are going to be very, very cool. One we call a double step. Sort of a hybrid version. It's something I would say in between our step change of direction drill that we do now and then like the full Happy Gilmore swing. So we're going to be asking the player for a little bit of front foot rebound as well as we go through. We're also working on one that we call a heel stomp or a squish the bug swing. That's going to be going in, and we're just going to be laying out, I think, in a little bit even more detail, just how we go through the initial, I would say 6 to 8 months worth of training, where we're going to build up with a few more protocols in that time period than we do now, where we really just work through our introduction protocol, then level 1, then level 2. We're going to space that out over actually 5 protocols as opposed to 3. And we're really excited about that coming. I think that's going to be fun. We'll be launching those over the summer. So be looking for that. We'll be, telling the world when we do, for sure.
Very cool. And I'm just curious. I want to know a little bit about, over the past, when did you guys start with SuperSpeed? When did you guys officially launch the product? Has it been 3-4 years?
Yeah, it was
2014.
Yeah, it was the World Golf Fitness Summit in 2014 was the official launch of the brand.
And what has the growth kind of looked like? I mean, how many units do you think are out in the universe now? Because it seems like every time I'm on social media, I see a new pallet being shipped somewhere over in the Middle East, or, it's just, you guys are everywhere. Any idea?
Trust me, our production partners would love to be on this call right now too, because we kind of sent projections at the end of last year. We're like, we want to make sure that because we had a little bit of a back order last spring, just for a little while, because the whole PGA show time and stocking up over the winter was a very busy time, and we had budgeted that year for 110% growth or something, and just blew that out of the water. And so this year, last year, Kyle, we sold, I think, right around 14,000 units. Wow. That was last year. So let's just say that we budgeted again, projection wise for the spring. and we've been like chasing it the whole time. But we're up a lot this year, so we're probably gonna at least double the number of units that we sold from last year this year. So it's rolling. I'd say there's probably 40,000 or so out in the world, low 40,000s at this point.
Fellas. I'd love to see it. I haven't met two guys that work harder to make sure that they're putting out such a quality product and, stand behind everything that you guys do. You guys are always making sure that your content is spot on and that, it's helping to educate, not just to put your product out there, but in order to help the golfers out there. So I just applaud you guys, and it's been cool to kind of see this whole trajectory. So really proud of you guys. I have to ask you, because I don't think the last time you guys were on the show, we were asking this question yet. And now with the Zurich Classic coming up, we're talking walk-up songs. So Mike, I know I'm putting you guys on the spot, but I got to know what your walk-up song is when you're heading up to the first tee box.
Oh, walking up to the first tee box, I'm just gonna go like super classic. We'll go Eye of the Tiger.
Nice. How about you, Kyle?
I feel like something from Weezer, like Beverly Hills.
Very nice.
With the beach balls going,
A little more laid back for Kyle.
Yeah, but they're like, they get you jacked up too.
I'm a much more competitive, intense player.
Well, we noticed, just from you yelling at LPGA players out on the driving range, we understand that.
I can say that one of our favorite things we say, and Mike and I couldn't be two more opposite people, and that's why I think it's been really successful for us. That he's terrible at the things I'm good at, and I'm terrible at the things he's good at. So
it's been fun. We've been working recently as we're doing all these videos to try to find some like apparel type stuff for the company, and it doesn't work because like anything that fits Kyle makes me look like a sausage basically. Anything that fits me looks like he's wearing a garbage bag. So it's been fun. We gave up and just said, go find your own clothes.
Yeah, I was gonna say you guys might just have to have separate apparel deals when you're doing your video stuff. Awesome. Well, guys, I really appreciate you coming on the show again. As always, I know that there's going to be a lot of people that are listening, and if they want to connect with you guys, obviously they can connect with you at superspeedgolf.com, but also in our private Facebook group on 18 Strong, the 18 Strong movement. These guys are always in there answering questions if you have any questions there. But once again, thanks for your time. Thanks for everything that you've done to support the 18 Strong podcast. Obviously, people listening know that you guys are huge sponsors and supporters of the show, so just can't thank you enough.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having us, Jeff. We always love working with you and supporting everything you do, and I think this is one of my favorite podcasts in the world, so thank you.
Okay, thanks for joining us this week on the 18 Strong podcast. If you have any questions on SuperSpeed Golf or any questions for Mike or Kyle, you can find them at superspeedgolf.com. You can also find any links to anything we talked about in the show here at 18strong.com. And it's episode number 189 with Kyle, Shay, and Mike Napoleon. I want to thank you for joining us this week on the show. And if this is your first time listening in, hopefully you made it all the way to the end of the episode and are looking forward to sharing this with a friend and going in and checking out some more episodes. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you get the newest episode downloaded every single week so you don't miss any of the great guests that we have coming up. All right, we'll catch up with you next week. Train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.
Thanks for listening to the 18 Strong podcast at www.18strong.com. And remember, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.